Some stories burn fast and disappear, but this isn't one of those stories. This is where a single look can wake something buried deep, where desire doesn't rush, it pulls with the force of destiny itself. Here, passion and tenderness collide in the darkness, turning one night into something that lives on beneath the skin forever. The kind of connection that doesn't fade with dawn, it deepens, spreads, stays. If you've ever wanted to feel seen, truly seen, to be desired down to your soul, to be loved in a way that rewrites everything you thought you knew about connection, you've come to the right place. Welcome to a world of true love stories where hearts recognize each other before lips ever touch, and where every story begins with a spark you'll never forget. It wasn't supposed to ever reach this point, and that's what made every moment twice as powerful. It started where it never should have begun, in silence, in distance, in the kind of glances that ended too quickly so others wouldn't notice. But something inside refused to listen to logic. It happened in the quiet spaces between duty and desire, in the way eyes found each other even when surrounded by people. That pull, it lived in the chest like a second heartbeat, always present, always impatient, always saying what lips could never risk. Every stolen glance carried more meaning than entire conversations spoken out loud. There were nights when sleep never came, only the memory of the way his presence made the air feel heavier, warmer, sharper. Even passing by him was dangerous, not because of anything seen by others, but because of everything felt inside. Every casual touch, every brush of hands, no matter how quick, was enough to spark a fire that couldn't be extinguished. Some connections are forbidden not because they are wrong, but because they are too true, too wild, too capable of changing everything. There was a time when control came easier, a time when it was possible to look away, to pretend that desire could be buried under responsibility. Then the distance started to feel like punishment. The pull grew stronger whenever it was resisted. That's when the secret moments began, not planned, not spoken of, only surrendered to. Passing in the hallway became an act of temptation. Sitting near him was like standing at the edge of something dangerous. When his hand brushed a shoulder or his voice dipped a little lower in private conversation, the entire world seemed to tilt. Nothing explicit ever happened in public, yet everything happened in those small, invisible sparks. Hidden smiles, lingering looks, and the electricity of restrained touch. That kind of desire is sharp, precise, unforgettable. It carves into the memory as though to claim it forever. Every moment apart hurt more, and every moment together set something free. Yet there was a wall neither dared cross fully, because to do so would unravel everything else around them. The forbidden nature of it only made the desire stronger, not tainted, but sacred and terrifying. His eyes spoke every single thing his mouth couldn't say. In those eyes were apologies, promises, confessions, and uncontrollable longing. Each time he looked, it was like being pulled forward without moving. Each time their hands touched accidentally, intentionally, the whole body lit up as if it already belonged to him. There were moments when breath caught in the throat, waiting for something that never came, yet somehow feeling satisfied because the longing itself felt like proof that it was real. Forbidden desire forces you to live in imagination. Yet imagination, when rooted in powerful attraction, becomes a form of truth that can't be denied. One evening everything slipped. A doorway, no one else around, a pause that lasted too long. He stepped closer, not touching, just close enough that his warmth could be felt. Breaths tangled in the space between. Neither dared to speak. Speaking risked everything. Instead, that moment hung in the air so heavy it was almost exhausting. That was when it happened, a kiss so quick it could have been passed off as an accident, but deep enough to set off a chain reaction inside that could never be taken back. From that point forward, everything changed. From then on, every hidden moment was chased with more intensity. Every brush of fingertips ignited a storm. The harder they tried to stay apart, the more inevitable their closeness became. It wasn't lust alone driving it. It was the recognition of something deeper, something soulful, something that felt like it had existed long before either had found the courage to acknowledge it. That kind of forbidden desire isn't fleeting, it's cosmic. It's written in the way his voice softened only for her, in the way his stare burned like confession, in how her skin came alive only under his attention. The guilt of wanting what wasn't allowed fought constantly with the joy of feeling something so unbelievably powerful. In private moments, she would find herself recalling the exact way his fingers traced her wrist, the quiet sound he made when their shoulders brushed. She'd lie awake replaying the memory of that single kiss, wondering how something so brief could feel like a lifetime's worth of emotion. There was no going back. Even if nothing more ever happened, everything had already happened. The heart had crossed lines the body hadn't yet dared, and there was no unfeeling it. Eventually, they stopped pretending it was going to fade. There were no more lies told to themselves about control. The desire didn't weaken, it evolved. It became a language only they could understand, a smile here, a warning glance there, a soft whisper of her name that made her legs go weak without him even touching. She lived for those stolen fragments of intimacy, for the moments in the shadows where hands dared to press into skin briefly, leaving behind invisible marks that throbbed long after. That kind of connection is rare, frightening because it demands surrender, breathtaking because it delivers meaning. She knew if the world discovered it, chaos might follow. Still, every time she told herself to stay away, a single moment in his presence would erase all restraint. The pull wasn't something chosen. It existed on its own, defying logic and rules. It burned deeper than anything respectable or proper. It was love blooming inside the soil of desire. It wasn't noble or calm. It was fierce, aching, and real. No matter how hidden it needed to be, it lived boldly inside her. Because when desire chooses you with that kind of fire, no amount of denial can truly extinguish it. It wasn't supposed to happen. That truth lived in every glance, every careful step. Every breath held a second too long. Yet, the more forbidden it became, the more inevitably it grew. He didn't belong in the safe brightness of everyday life. He existed in the hushed moments between, in the spaces where rules blurred and longing spoke louder than reason. It was always in the shadows that everything came alive. There was a thrill to it, not reckless, not childish, but sharp and undeniable. Every time footsteps echoed down a hallway, every time a door had to close quietly instead of slamming, the pulse quickened not just from fear, but from the anticipation that followed. The knowledge that discovery could destroy everything somehow made the tenderness deeper and the fire burn hotter. Eyes would meet across a crowded room pretending not to see each other, yet some part inside would already be burning. Touches had to be swift. Fingers brushing while passing each other felt more electric than most kisses ever did. It wasn't the size of the gesture, it was the weight behind it. And when the world finally turned its back, when doors clicked shut, when lights dimmed low, the shadows cradled them like co-conspirators. His hands knew just where to linger, mapping the soft places memory had memorized, and every time lips met, it felt like reclaiming a life that only existed when no one else was watching. There were nights of silence where the only sound was breath, slow and shaken. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, just surrender in stillness, knowing time was limited and yet somehow infinite. The way his voice lowered in the dark carried more truth than anything spoken under sunlight. And each whispered word wrapped around skin like a promise, both fragile and fierce. It wasn't just passion, though passion pulsed through every inch. It was something deeper, a devotion that could survive not being seen, not being named. A kind of love that wasn't asking to be celebrated. It only asked to be felt. There was strength in that privacy, in the secrecy that made them guard each moment like treasure. Fear and desire curled together like smoke around fire, inseparable, beautiful, dangerous. Waiting was agony, long days pretending not to ache, yet even the ache was precious, because when the shadows finally rose again, when another hidden meeting was carved out, it always felt like being reborn. Eyes adjusting to the dim light would find him there, and everything inside would melt before a single word was spoken. Passion didn't need daylight to prove itself. It breathed deepest when everything else slept. There were times she wondered if it would last, if anything this intense could survive without eventually demanding daylight, but every time doubt whispered, his touch answered, strong, unshakable, certain. Love doesn't always need to be seen to be real. Sometimes it is at its most powerful when it belongs only to the two who carry it. And so it stayed, beating silently inside ribcage like a secret heartbeat no one else could hear. Somewhere inside was the constant knowledge that it could all be gone in a moment, a rumor, a wrong turn, a door opened too soon, and yet that only made every meeting more sacred. Love fought for in silence left marks that would never fade. Not in the memory of skin, not in the rhythm of breath, not even in the heart that tried to stay guarded but surrendered anyway, because in those shadows, where others would have seen only darkness and danger, lived the most undeniable truth either had ever known. It began with a fire already burning inside, the kind that had no clear beginning, as though it had always been waiting for the moment to ignite into something unstoppable. There was nothing delicate about the way our bodies found each other. It was desperate, hungry, like two souls that had survived on emptiness for far too long and suddenly tasted the one thing they'd been denied. Mouths met like they had stories to tell and no language but heat. Every kiss landed hard, searing into skin, into memory, making it impossible to breathe without wanting more. Hands moved fast, not carelessly, but with a knowing urgency, mapping each curve, each line, pulling closer, closer, until there was no space left between us, and still it didn't feel close enough. The air around us felt charged, alive, as if it crackled with something wild and unspoken. Clothing became an obstacle to closeness, peeled away with a feverish need that bordered on anger, not anger at each other, but at all the months, years, maybe lifetimes that had kept us apart. When skin finally met skin, it wasn't gentle. It was an ache relieved and renewed in the same breath. Hands grasped, not to take, but to anchor, to make sure this was real, that the body being touched wouldn't vanish like a dream at sunrise. It felt like survival, like oxygen, like every nerve ending had been asleep and was now alive with unbearable sensation. Each kiss went deeper, bruising in the sweetest way, as though lips wanted to leave proof behind proof that we existed here together in this moment. Groans and gasps slipped out like confessions. There was no shame in the hunger. If anything, there was reverence in it, a fierce worship that said, I see you, I want you, I will not let you go. Fingers dug into shoulders, into hips, urging more, harder, deeper. It was a rhythm born not from control, but instinct, a primal knowing of what the other needed before a single word could be spoken. Bodies moved together with an intensity that erased every doubt, every hesitation. There was a madness in the way we clung to each other, as if tearing apart might mean dying, and yet beneath the heat there was a tenderness so startling it made the heart ache. Between gasps and moans, there were moments where eyes met and held raw, vulnerable, wide open. In those brief seconds, the world seemed to fall away entirely, leaving only two souls naked in every possible way, bound by something stronger than want. The way hands cradled the back of a head, how fingers threaded through hair, how a thumb-traced trembling lips these tiny moments carried just as much power as the fierce thrusts and desperate clings. It wasn't just lust, though that burned hot and undeniable. It was something wholly dressed in the clothing of desire. Every movement said, "Stay, don't disappear. This matters more than anything that came before." There was pleasure, yes, sharp and overwhelming, but spinning through it was a deeper current, an emotion so big it felt almost painful. When release finally came, it wasn't the end. We stayed wrapped around each other, still moving, still kissing, still needing that contact, as though letting go even for a second might cause everything to break apart. Sweat slicked our skin, breath came in shaky bursts, hearts pounded out of our chests. But instead of settling, the hunger rose again, softer this time but just as consuming. There was a slow rocking, a tender grind, a hand stroking a cheek with reverence. Words weren't necessary, the body spoke clearly, saying again, again, again. As the night stretched on, the urgency shifted, softened. What had started as wild survival settled into something deeper, a knowing, a staying, a gentle consuming. Kisses turned slower but no less intense. Fingers traced patterns as if memorizing the map of a beloved country. There were soft sighs instead of ragged moans, noses brushing, foreheads touching. Still, that hunger remained underneath, not gone, just transformed. Because even in rest, there was desire. Even in stillness, there was movement in the soul, a pull that whispered forever. By the time dawn painted the room with its pale light, nothing had faded. Happiness glowed beneath the skin like embers, warm and alive. Touches were soft but steady, promises spoken through lingering fingertips and lingering kisses on bare shoulders. The hunger was no less powerful, even though the pace had slowed. Because this wasn't just about taking, it was about becoming, about two bodies melting into something that couldn't be undone. And that was when it became undeniable. Once this kind of love touches you, there's no returning to the person you were before. It's the kind of bond that doesn't break cleanly, not even when pulled apart with all the force the world can offer. It stretches across time, across miles, across silence that lasts longer than anyone can bear, and still it holds. Nothing about it makes logical sense. Hearts shouldn't keep aching for someone who isn't there. Skin shouldn't still shiver from the memory of hands that haven't touched it in years. Breath shouldn't still catch at the thought of a voice that hasn't spoken your name since everything went wrong. Yet it does. It always does. There came a moment when walking away felt necessary. Life, circumstance, expectations, they all crowded in, shouting louder than the soft truth that whispered this love was different. It wasn't weakness that led to distance. It was fear. Fear of losing oneself in something so powerful, so consuming, it could rewrite an entire existence. So the choice was made to separate, believing time would dull what neither wanted to admit was impossible to forget. But forgetting never happened. Time, instead of healing, made everything sharper. Every step taken without him felt just slightly out of rhythm. Every laugh came a little too lightly. Sleep never quite settled the way it used to, because the body, in its quiet wisdom, remembered the warmth it once rested against. That comfort was irreplaceable, not because the world lacked options, but because souls don't pair with just anyone. Once matched, once intertwined, that recognition cannot be unlearned. It becomes part of the blood itself. There were other faces, other conversations, other hands reaching out in the dark, attempting to offer what had once felt natural. But it never fit. Each touch felt foreign, each smile too unfamiliar. Deep inside, the truth remained untouched no matter where life led. There was only one place that ever truly felt like home, and it wasn't a location. It was a person. Even without contact, life had a cruel way of offering reminders, A song unexpectedly playing in a grocery store, a specific scent passing in the breeze with such force it stopped movement entirely. A look in someone else's eyes that mirrored the one once seen in his, only to realize no resemblance could truly match what had been lost. These moments sliced through even the strongest defenses, allowing longing to bloom fierce and undeniable. Sometimes the bond would tug hard enough to bring dreams at night, vivid dreams in which distance no longer existed, dreams where voices laughed again, hands held tight, promises softly mended themselves. Waking from those dreams hurt worse than any argument ever had, because waking meant remembering reality, that life moved forward separately, though imaginations still wandered backward together. Still, hope never truly died. Maybe it altered its shape, maybe it no longer shouted with youthful certainty. Instead, it hummed quietly, believing that what's meant to be cannot be erased. Somewhere deep, there was faith that two souls stitched together by something so rare would find a way back, even if roads twisted cruelly in between. Love like that didn't beg or chase. It simply waited, burning steadily like a lighthouse in a storm, trusting that someday the other would see the glow and remember where to return. And then, just when time had nearly convinced a surrender, there came an unexpected sign. A fleeting glimpse, a message left unsent, a sighting across a crowded street when the heart skipped the kind of beat it hadn't known in years. Eyes met, only for a second, but everything roared back to life. Because nothing had truly been lost. Even miles and silence hadn't managed to sever what was written beneath the skin. That moment was gentle, cautious, the kind where tears threatened just from the relief of finally being seen again. And in that gaze there was apology, there was yearning, there was gratitude, but most of all, there was recognition. The kind that says, despite everything, despite every mile, the bond stood firm. It had survived heartbreak, denial, time, and distance. It had endured absence so profound it almost convinced the heart to forget how to hope. There were no grand speeches, no declarations, just a step forward, a hand hesitantly outstretched. A brush of fingers that felt like the very first time, even though both bodies remembered exactly how the other felt. And from that single touch, everything before and after collapsed into one certainty. Some loves are written not just on the heart, but far deeper. Because even when torn apart, what was real never died. If this story made your heart feel something real, don't let it be the last. Like this video, subscribe now, and turn on notifications, because here, every new story is another heartbeat waiting to find you.